Chapter 5. The wall fell down flat. Moses' children of Israel, of whom Joshua now commands, had become a mighty army and were adept at reclaiming dominance throughout their homeland. This was also a period where the ancient Egyptians dominated the world and accomplished stupendous engineering feats like the pyramids and many other megalithic temples and structures which are still tremendously difficult to replicate. Jericho's walls would have been equally impressive. So impressive were they that the Bible says they were fenced up to heaven. Hear, O Israel, thou art to pass over the Jordan this day, to go in to dispossess nations greater and mightier than thyself, cities great and fortified up to heaven. Deuteronomy 9:1. During the transition from the proto-urban period into the early Bronze Age, trade was evolving into a more prominent source of income than previous, more agronomical sources. This led to several socio-economic changes and a sudden increase in populace, necessitating the development of more strategic and resistive strongholds. The walls in ancient Jericho, approximately 9,400 BC, are believed to have been over 3.5 meters in height and almost 2 meters wide at the base. This is approximately 8,000 years prior to Joshua's invasion, where there had been plenty of opportunity for the development of the city's base defences. After 8,000 years of conflict and expansion development necessitating improved fortifications, the dimensions of the walls of Jericho during Joshua's conquest was 2 to 4 meters thick, 5 meters in height, and an extra 6 to 8 meters of mud brick wall above that, making a grand total of 10 to 13 meters in height. Additionally, the walls were a double enclosure. There was an inner wall and an outer wall, with houses in between. The inner wall was 12 feet thick and the outer was 6. Siege attempts throughout history to destroy walls of this magnitude have included undermining, bombardment and/or explosives, all of which were not supposed to exist during that time. The walls of Jericho were renowned for their height, and there is little recognition of any other city's walls specifically during this period. By the Bronze Age, its walls had been strengthened, expanded, and included a very tall 28.5 meter tower in the centre of one wall, which is one of the earliest stone monuments ever discovered. The thickness of the walls was also immense, so immense that people lived in houses within them. Rahab's house was within the city's walls, which is very curious. This was commonplace, and an army's troops typically garrisoned the walls of a stronghold, with King Herod's ancient fortress Masada, approximately 50 kilometers south of Jericho, being another example. Joshua's spies escaped via Rahab's window using a rope, further illustrating the enormity of the walls. The wall fell down flat once Joshua's army shouted. This perfectly timed breach followed a countdown beforehand, hence the 7 days marching and the final 7 rotations on the final day. This whole battle required order, and the fact that the walls fell on cue suggests their demolition was somehow controlled. Controlled implosion. And the high fortress of thy walls will he bring down, lay low, and bring to the ground, even to the dust. Isaiah 25:12. The wall fell down flat, Joshua 6:20, which in Hebrew means fell beneath itself. This is a very detailed description which should be emphasized. It does not say the wall collapsed, crumbled, blew to pieces, or was simply destroyed. No, it says fell down flat, or beneath itself. This is a perfect description of a controlled implosion. Nowadays, when we destroy buildings in a controlled implosion, the building falls flat in itself. It pancakes to the ground, yet remains level at the top. Or, in biblical terms, it falls down flat. Although the acquisition and use of explosives 1400 BC is not as outrageous as one might think, they are unnecessary in this circumstance. The most effective method of destroying a wall and other tall structures is to disturb the foundations and let them collapse under their own weight. And for this, explosives are unnecessary. Subsidence, voids, sinkholes generated by undermining are more realistic, and mining-induced subsidence may explain their on-cue destruction, for which a simple fire burning a wooden support holding the mine together would suffice. And I will kindle a fire in the wall of Damascus, and it shall devour the palaces of Ben-Hadad. Jeremiah 49:27. My research led me to a man named Sir Charles Warren, who, while exploring Jericho in search for the famous lost city back in 1868, imploded a shaft at Tel Es Sultan, Arabic for Jericho. Sinkholes frequent this part of the world because of the salt from the Dead Sea, which is very close to Jericho. This salt is naturally dissolved by groundwater, and spaces, voids, develop underground. But although this is a natural explanation for what happened to this settlement, it is hardly fitting with this extraordinary testimony and the somewhat providential collapse of the walls. Man-made subsidence, however, was commonplace in the capturing of settlements. It takes weeks or months of preparation to make buildings implode, so Joshua needed to buy the captain some time. Again, this is precisely what we have with the marching around the city of Jericho for a week, providing enough time for someone at the other side of the city to prepare the walls for implosion using an ancient technique developed by the Romans during this era known as sapping or undermining. This intriguing new way of destroying walls involved digging underneath the foundations, causing them to collapse. Preparations for a controlled implosion can be carried out in a week, and undermining is required for this. Digging tunnels up to walls using the Roman method of sapping takes weeks if not months, but there are very important battles in history where this time frame was significantly reduced. Take the 1179 AD battle between King Baldwin and Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria, for example. Skillfully using his archers to divert Baldwin's attention away from his sappers, Saladin's men managed to dig 100 feet a day through solid rock without the use of machinery or explosives, and reached the walls of a stronghold within 5 days. What is very interesting and relevant about this particular ancient battle is the use of a distraction once again. Did Joshua use the same tactics, but instead of distracting the enemy with archers, he used 7 priests, blowing on ram's horns perhaps? Engineers will use as little explosives as possible with current controlled implosions. Explosives are simply the trigger for the demolition, while the weight of the structure itself is what brings it crashing to the ground. In ancient times, explosives were not necessary to achieve this. Undermining at a select section of the wall with a large enough breach for the troops to get through once they had fallen, and triggering the wall to fall by burning a simple wooden support, is all that is required to make the wall fall down flat. The whole story concerning the destruction of Jericho's walls is not so ridiculous once one considers a simple yet highly effective controlled implosion by whatever means necessary. Nowhere does it state that the noise from the cheers or the trumpet are what caused them to fall, just that they fall when this action takes place, and an army usually does this before charging into battle.